Hello there and welcome, friends and fellow artists. My name is Cassie and I am so pleased to welcome you to another one of my nature-based art and meditation tutorials. Today we are going to enjoy a nice warm cup of coffee as we practice coffee painting together. Now, as you may know, these videos are made alongside my fundraiser for the Walk to End Alzheimer's this year. And they are meant to be a resource for anyone, including caregivers and people with dementia, as a way to practice self-care, to connect with nature in a new way, and to practice mindfulness as a tool for managing stress, which I think we could all use. So the materials that we'll need for today's painting are heavy paper. I recommend using watercolor paper if you can get it because it absorbs the moisture and keeps your ink from flying around all over the paper. But any thicker gauge paper you can get easily, it will work just fine. I'm using multimedia paper, which is not quite as thick as watercolor paper, but it will work for our purposes today. You'll need some hot water, a spoon to measure your instant coffee and your water, a paper towel to clean your brush, instant coffee. You can use brewed coffee, but instant coffee works the best because you're able to add more instant coffee if you need a darker value, whereas with brewed coffee you're kind of capped at a certain level of darkness that you can achieve. This box I got at Walmart for $1, so it's very inexpensive and it comes in individual packets, so it's perfect for my needs because I don't drink instant coffee, I usually brew mine. You'll also need a palette. Ones with little sections work the best to hold the ink in place. If you don't have a palette on hand, you can use a couple different lids or bottle caps to separate your ink, and really we're not going to be using very much of each, so they can be relatively small. Mine's pretty small, if you can see my palette there. And of course you'll need some paintbrushes. So I would choose a couple different varying sizes. So I have kind of a very small detail brush, a bigger one, and then a large flat brush. And today we are going to be thinking about gratitude for our meditation. So we'll be talking throughout the process about gratitude and how that relates to our relationship with nature and how we can use gratitude as a practice in connection with mindfulness to kind of de-stress and focus our minds on something positive and uplifting. So let's get started together. The first thing we need to do is get our coffee ready to go, ready to paint. So you'll need your palette. I'm going to use my paper towel here underneath it. And we'll be using the spoon to measure our instant coffee. So I have just a small teaspoon here. And I'm going to pour some instant coffee into the little sections of my palette. So I'll do about a teaspoon, maybe a little bit less. We're just kind of eyeballing it, but we want maybe 4 or 5 different values. So we'll choose one with a lot of instant coffee, one with a little bit less, one with a lot less, and then one with barely any. And we'll put that into our palette. And we'll do the same thing with the water. So I'm using my teaspoon, getting some water, and adding it to the instant coffee that's in each of the sections of my palette. And then you'll just mix that with a brush. It's best to use hot water for this so that the instant coffee dissolves really easily and you don't have little grains left over. But cold water will work as well. Hot water is just the best for that, to dissolve the grains. So we'll just mix each one until the instant coffee is dissolved. I can smell the coffee already. That's one reason why I wanted to work with coffee painting. It's because of the sensory quality of coffee. I just love the smell of coffee. I obviously love the taste of coffee. And I think it is just really neat that we can use it as an art material. Clearly, coffee grows from the ground, so it's a natural material. It's a plant that we use, many of us on a daily basis. Okay, so I'm going to clean my brush now that each of those is mixed. And on the side of the paper, I'm going to test the values to make sure that I have dark, 2 shades of medium, and light to work with. So I'm going to use my bigger brush to test out the values, and I'm just going to do it along the side of my paper here. So we have the darkest value up top. Let's see. As you can see, there's not a huge difference in between those 2 values. So I'm going to add some more water to this one and lighten it up. And again, that is why I recommend using the instant coffee, because we are able to control how much coffee to how much water ratio we are using in order to get the values just right. All right, let's try that again. Okay, so there's a medium tone. There's a slightly lighter tone. And let's try this one. That one's a little dark too, so we'll add some more water to our lightest. Let's try that again. There, pretty light. So once you have your values sorted out, we're going to start the image. And for today's image that I'll be walking through, I chose a landscape, of course, something nature related, but I chose a mountain landscape because practicing gratitude is not always easy. Sometimes, and I feel like probably the best time to practice gratitude is when you feel like you're in a season of scarcity, when things are challenging. And mountains are often used for a symbol of challenges and overcoming. So I thought that this would be a great symbol for our gratitude meditation today. So we're going to start with the sky, right behind the mountains. So I want us to use our lightest value of coffee. And we are going to be about in the middle of our page. We're just going to swipe some coffee out to fill in the space of the sky here. And if you'd like to leave us a little curve of white paper representing the sun, you can do that as well. That'll be our light source. I love that as we're working with this coffee and creating our coffee painting, we can smell that beautiful, rich coffee smell. All right. So then we'll add a layer a little bit darker on top of that, moving up the page. So you can see it kind of blends together. We'll add a darker value above that. So it's getting darker the farther away from the sun that we get. And as you can see, I have quite a big sheet of paper here, and I'm not using the whole thing. So towards the end, I am actually going to tear the edges of my paper because I like that kind of rugged, rough look around the outside. But if you'd like to fill up your whole page, you can. That's a choice that's up to the artist here. It does help to work in a manageable size so that you're not spending too much time filling in space. But also you don't want to work so small that you're not able to put too much detail in. So it's kind of a balance that you need to figure out as an artist. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush here. And with the dirty water on the brush, I'm going to kind of blend a little bit. Now you don't want to get too carried away with adding water because you want your page to stay as dry as you can so that it's not warping and tearing depending on how thick your paper is. If it's thin paper, it could tear a hole through it, so we want to avoid that. But just to kind of soften those edges a little bit that I have. And towards the sun, we're going to add a little bit of softness there between the white page and the darker coffee paint. So, throughout the video, I will be adding progress images since the video is shooting my paper upside down, so you can kind of get an idea of where I'm at, and I will insert those through the video. Okay, so our next step here is we are going to start the mountains. Now, we're going to have a couple different mountain ranges that are getting progressively closer to us. So the ones in the back, all the way in the back that we'll start with, are going to be a lighter color than the darker ones in the foreground that are closer to us. So we're going to begin laying those mountains out. We'll start with our lightest value of coffee paint. And we're just doing kind of a mountainy shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look great, in your opinion. We're just laying out shapes right now, and then we'll work on details later. And the mountains that are in the background are not going to have detail on them anyway, so don't get too caught up in making your mountains look perfect. Remember, this is nature, And she does things her own way, doesn't she? She doesn't worry about if the branches are too crooked or if the mountain range is straight. It kind of just is. It kind of just happens. So we will add a few peaks here in the same value and fill them in. I'm going to add some water down below here to kind of blend it a little bit. Kind of rough that up a little bit. All right. So we have our first mountain range, and I will insert a photo of that. So we're going to move into our next value here. And don't forget to take coffee breaks as we go. It's always nice to enjoy a cup of coffee with friends, isn't it? I think that's just such a beautiful image, is coffee as kind of this way of gathering and sharing time together. I know that when my best friend is in town, she lives out of state, and so when she comes to visit, we always try to grab a cup of coffee and sit down and catch up for a while. I think coffee really can bring back a lot of good memories. That's one of the benefits of working with materials that have strong scents. Scents are very connected to memory, actually. So a lot of times people will have memories sparked by certain smells. A certain smell reminds you of home or reminds you of your mother or father. I know one of my earliest memories related to the smell of coffee has to do with my dad, because he would drink coffee like all day long. He would have a cup of coffee. So I remember that as a child. I associated the smell of coffee with my dad. And now I'm drinking coffee all day long because I have small children to take care of. So think about what smells and what memories coffee brings to mind for you. As we're working, you can think about that. And be grateful for those memories. Maybe the smell of coffee reminds you of working. A lot of people drink coffee throughout their workday. And so maybe that reminds you of your profession, of your coworkers, your career path that you're passionate about. Maybe coffee reminds you of late nights, trying to accomplish projects that you couldn't get done during the day for one reason or another. What does coffee remind you of? And is that something that you are grateful for, are thankful for? So think about that as you're working. Let the smell of the coffee bring back those memories. And as I'm working here, I'm just adding layers and layers of mountains. letting them get darker as I go along. And at the very bottom here, I'm going to take my brush, my flat brush that I've been using with water, and I'm just going to lay out what's called a wash, which is just water on the paper. Up to this final mountain range, which I am actually going to use some more coffee to darken this up, because I want the foreground here to be very dark. So I'm just going to add some coffee to my darkest value in my palette. Mix it in. So that we can get that front mountain range to really pop forward. Let's try this. Good. So coffee can be a wonderful reminder of our gratitude for a multitude of relationships and even roles, different roles that we've had in our life, such as working, parenting, friendships. It can be a wonderful reminder of that. But it can also be a reminder of how our natural world supports our life. Coffee is, like I said, of course, a plant. It grows from the earth. And I think it's beautiful to kind of reflect on how earth supports us and provides for us and nurtures us. Even in our current day and age, where we are often very disconnected from nature unless we go out of our way to seek out natural experiences. So we can reflect on that as well and be grateful for the sustenance that our natural world provides for us. Because without it, we wouldn't be here. So that's another thing to kind of consider as we work here. Okay, so I'm going to kind of shift the camera down. Now I'm working on this front mountain range here with some darker colored coffee paint, and I am just kind of choosing an angle on the mountains and adding little brush strokes here and there, all going in the same direction. It kind of shows a little bit of detail on these mountains that we created. Again, we're not getting too caught up right now in the details. But now that we are working in the foreground, we can kind of add in a little bit extra, more than what we had before. Okay. So, let me take a little progress picture to add to the video and share with you all. As you can see, above the sun, I have this little paint splotch. that I am going to just kind of dull a little bit with some water. So if you make mistakes, you can always rework that area. Again, don't get too caught up in reworking a part and getting the water in that one little spot on the page, because you could tear the paper and we don't want to do that yet. So don't let it get to you. We can always add a bird or something over that splotch and be a-okay. Alright, so we are about finished with this flat brush right now, and we're going to add some details to our mountain range that's in the foreground. So that is the darkest mountain range along the bottom of the page, and we'll just add in a few little silhouettes of trees that might be growing there. So you're going to use the darkest value paint that you have on a smaller brush. I'm choosing not the smallest that I have, but a quite small little guy there. And I'm just going to add a few little lines here and there on the mountains to indicate where some trees might be. This reminds me of the Smoky Mountains. I have a loved one in Tennessee that lives in the mountains, and when we go visit her, it's just so beautiful driving through those Smoky Mountains, especially at sunrise. It's hazy and so colorful and beautiful. This is what that kind of reminds me of. So as you're working, really pay attention to the memories that come up. If you happen to think of somebody or something, an experience in your life as you're creating, take notice of that and reflect on that as part of your process here. I think that is so beautiful, that the process of making art can really bring up such wonderful thoughts and ideas in our minds that we may not have expected as we first go into the project. But it's funny how art has a way of doing that. Alright, so now I'm going to take the smallest brush that I have. If you have a little detail brush, this would be the time to use that. I'll take another progress picture of the lines that I added to the mountains. And we're going to, again, use the darkest value of coffee to add a few more little details to those trees. Maybe give them some branches, give them different shapes. Anything you feel that your little mountain range needs, you can add in. This is your world that you're creating, so please don't feel restrained by my example here. Use it as a jumping off point for your own creation. I said in my last video that it's important not to compare our product to what anyone else creates, because the beauty is that This is coming from you, from your heart, from your mind. So it is a unique creation, all your own. And really, it's about the process of creating it. When we're doing this, we are actively making time in our day, making space for self-care, for something enjoyable, something new. And that in and of itself is more important than having a nice looking painting at the end of this. So make sure that you enjoy the process, that you give yourself some grace, and that you stay open to trying a new thing. Who knows, you might be secretly this coffee painting master. This may be your calling that you're discovering right now. And if it is, please let me know, because that is super cool. In researching this, I've found a few coffee painting artists that is like their niche, their thing that they love to work with is coffee painting. And their artworks are so beautiful. And working with this, brown toned media just seems so warm and inviting. I guess that has to do with the whole coffee experience, right? Coffee is such a inviting, homey and comfortable kind of drink. So don't forget to take your coffee breaks. Let's enjoy our coffee together. And I will add another progress photo here of those trees and little details in the landscape. And I think the last thing that I'm going to do here is I am going to put a little bird in the sky. I love birds and I use them quite often in my personal artwork as a symbol of myself or as a symbol of freedom. So I think I'm going to add a little bird flying in the sky here, and I'm going to use it in the same place that I had that weird little water splotch in the sky. So you can always reimagine your artwork as you need to. Maybe this little bird was always meant to be here. So, there. So I think that I am about done adding images here. And like I said, I really love the rugged, torn edges, so I'm going to use tearing the paper to crop my image a little bit and find where I want that edge to be. I don't want to annihilate too much of my bird, but they're going to lose the tip of their wing there. So I really enjoy tearing the edges of a lot of my artwork. Again, it's a personal choice, so don't feel like you have to do this. But I think it adds just a kind of organic edge. I think it looks nice, especially when we're using media like the coffee painting or watercolor or ink to have that edge. kind of contrasting with the texture of the image. So, here we are, our little mountain landscape, coffee painting. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope that you learned something new. I really appreciate you joining me for an art making session, for a cup of coffee, and if you feel so inclined to support me in my walk to end Alzheimer's this year, you can find the link to my walk page in the description of this video. And I look forward to our next meeting. Thank you so much. Take care.